So first up, we have Jacob Lachmann, CEO of Audience Project. Jacob has been a pioneer in the online advertising space since 1996, and he leads Audience Project, which is a MarTech company supplying cross-platform digital audience ecosystems to publishers. I think I got that right. Previously, Jacob was a VP of sales at AOL. He's also a fellow Danish company, so a fellow Viking company, so we're very pleased to invite him onto the stage. Jacob.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for that nice introduction. It's always good with a little bit of Viking in the room. Jacob, thanks. So, I need to find the flicker here. Let's see, here we go. Nice big one. So, yeah, my name is Jacob Lachmann. I work with a company called Audience Project, and I wouldn't expect that many of you to know anything about Audience Project, so I'm just going to spend 2 minutes on telling you a little bit about what we do. So, we're inherently a Danish company. We work in 7 countries now, in the Nordics, in the UK, in Germany, and then we have an outlier in Vietnam, which is a bit far off. We work with data on a broader scale, so we work with targeting data and work with measurement. So we basically usually say that we create, validate, distribute, and measure audiences. So it's on both sides of the scale. It's both the targeting, but also the measurement and validation. We do it real time. We do it based on real people. We do it cross media, so we have an integration to TV, so you can see what the reach you're delivering on your online activations are also delivering on top as incremental reach to your TV. And we can deliver that both as a planning tool, but also as a measurement tool. We have our own proprietary panels, and we have a very nice, recognizable customer base, I would believe. So, what I'm going to talk to you about today is a bit about what I think you should think about when you're trying to build a data ecosystem around your business or your clients' businesses. So, taking a little bit step back, we have come in the last 4 or 5 years from a state where we were buying media into a state where we are buying audiences. So it's more about defining the audience that you want to buy. It's not so much about buying the front page of any publisher somewhere. So that's been the first stage of that transition into buying audiences. But I believe very strongly that right now we're in the middle of taking another leap, which is basically being even more refined. And in GDPR times, this might sound a little bit strong, but I believe we're in the middle of going even further, going from audiences into real people. And when I say real people, it's real profiles. It's much deeper profiles with much more data on. And actually, I would say opposite to or contrary to what you might think, I think that probably GDPR is going to help this. Because today, when you're not really asking for permission, it's also a limitation to what data you can get. But once you've asked for permission and you've gotten the permission, then you can really start utilizing the deep data that you have. So if you're a client and you have a lot of data, securing that deeper consent will make it very strong for you. Taking a little step back, this is actually something from our vision and mission work at Audience Project. I wrote this 3 years ago, and I thought I was really insightful and forward-thinking. So all audiences will be digital, and media will be bought on based of specific audiences. I think we can say check, that's been achieved. The other side of things, the bracket at the bottom about data being fluent, I think when I say data being fluent, it's more about thinking to the furthest degree. You probably go to something like a Minority Report, where you're bringing your own data around, you're being recognized with the data you have, you allow someone to step into your data room. So fluidity of data will bring another freedom in the way that we work with it. And I think that if you look at data today, data is probably more like this. So it's stale often. If you're working with a brand, they often have the data sitting in several different databases with different consent layers, with different data attributes that you can't really match, and it's hard to activate it. I think that just very old school, working the papers here. Yeah, so the data is sitting often very stale, and it's very hard to activate it. And really today, it's not about figuring out or finding data as it was before. Today we have tons of data. It's more about figuring out what data to use. And I normally say this, that data equals dollars, but to be able to get to those dollars, you need to be able to activate your data. So there's a lot of things that you need to build around yourself to be able to activate that data. You need to step into someone's data ecosystem to put your data to life. And that can be a walled garden data ecosystem. You can, well, there's a brief, I would say, closure for that, but up until a couple of weeks ago, you could upload your data into Facebook, and then you could put it live in there. You've been able to work with Google, where you can put your data live in their walled gardens. And I think that we continue to see that. So it's basically putting your data live in other people's data ecosystems. And I think some of the most important things around that, whether you are a publisher, whether you're a brand, or whether you're an agency, it's figuring out how to step into a data ecosystem that not only consists of big walled gardens. You need to build your own data system, which is a bit autonomous from what is being controlled by others. Yeah. So I think that there's a couple of other, angles to the data and the dollars. I think if you look into the data ecosystem, there's also been a constant competition for being the one who adds the data to the media buy. So the one that adds the data to the media buy is the one that can charge the premium for that data. So if it's the agency that creates the data and adds it to the media, then they're charging the client for it. If it's the publisher that creates the data, then they're charging the client for it. If you're a client and you can create your own data, then you will keep that premium. And that is a constant competition that's going on, which is quite interesting to follow. I think from a top line, is my bet is that I think that the trend is that the price for data will increase. And I think that GDPR will also help that, because there will be a limitation to the data, but there's still a big demand. We can see when we look into the results of the campaigns that the data-driven campaigns, they deliver a better result than the others. So I think the data, at some point, the price for data will exceed the price for media. So when we're talking about data, we often talk about data in very broad terms. So when I talk about data here, it's all in a media context. And I always wonder a little bit about the buying and the selling of data. Often when you're buying something, you would ask for a declaration of contents for what you're buying. If you would want to know where it's from, what's it made of. So I make this analogy about minced meat and data, because today, most often in the ecosystem, questions are not being asked about what's in the data you're buying. You're taking for granted when you're looking into a data platform where you can see thousands and thousands of segments for sale, that if it says that it's women, then it's women. But what does it mean, really, to buy that? Are you buying women segments with 60% precision, or is it 80, or is it 90% precision? Stuff like that you need to ask. Also, where does the data actually come from? Is it based on pure behavioral data, or are there some real people behind it? Is it being matched against some real life data so the quality of the data is better? All these things are not asked, but I guarantee you, when you go to the supermarket and buy minced meat, you look at the tag and you look at, is it 5% fat? Is it 10% fat? Is it 15? Is it Polish? Is it British Prime? Stuff like that. We need to get into that whole discussion around data. So I think that that's one of the notes. If I was to build a data ecosystem today, I would look at vendors that are declaring their data, that are open about what they're doing, and what's the origin of that data. I think another thing I would look into is how much manual work does it actually take to get your data live? Is it worth it? I mean, how much money does it cost just in hands to get that data out there to just make your campaign a little bit better? So it's a classical economic discussion, I'd say. I think probably the next slide is probably the most important one. When you're trying to build your data ecosystem around you, we think it's often very given what's what's on the label. So, but most often it's not. And I think that when you're looking at your data ecosystem, it's about making sure that you have checked all the links, because it's always the weakest link that's going to compromise what you're doing. And I tried to fill in a couple of smiling slides since it's late in the afternoon and drinks are in between us. But my point here is that we have seen stuff like synchronizations where all of a sudden you're synchronizing your data from one platform to the other, and then you're losing all your iOS devices, or you're losing all your mobile devices, and stuff like that makes it quite important that you're looking into it. We had a case with a brand that was looking to reach young people, and they upload their data. On the way, all their mobile devices disappears. They bought a campaign on a publisher where they know there's a lot of young people, but they couldn't understand why the measurement afterwards showed that it was only older people. It's just because it was only the laptops and desktops they were seeing, no mobile. So we sort of pinned it back and found that. So you're never stronger than the weakest link when you're talking about building your data ecosystem. So the next slide is something that has been talked about quite a lot: transparency. In our minds, transparency is a strategy. In fact, it's the only strategy. So it's not just once in a while that you're interested in understanding where your money went, which part of your money was actually invested in the right way. You want to understand that all the time. And that puts some demands on the technical platform that you have and the data platform that you have. It means that you have to be able to measure everything you do. It's not just when the campaign budget is big enough for investing in that one campaign measurement and understanding that. You also want to understand the small campaigns you're running. You want to understand the big ones. You want to drive as much data on your campaign performance as you can, so you can learn from that data on a bigger scale afterwards. So. Also earlier we had a panel where there was whoops. Okay, we're skipping a slide here. So when talking about transparency, I think there's like 3 layers to it. So first layer is the finances. So who's making what money on your investments journey through the system, and the second layer is the execution, the 4 pillars of transparency that has been talked about earlier today: the in-view, the brand safety, the human robot thing, and also the in-demo. And then under that is the whole data structure, the transparency in that data structure that makes you understand what you're actually getting when you're buying a platform or a product. And I'd like to try to give an example of that here. So we are dealing very much with the in-demo category of the 4 pillars. So that's where we know the most of it. And to tell you the story of what's important there, it's a lot about recognizing IDs and being able to continuously working on the same IDs with people. So here it's about tying devices together. If you understand that it's the same person across the 3 devices, you're able to generate the right frequency. You're able to understand that you are using one impression to reach one person instead of the 3 impressions to reach one person. That would be in this case. So this basically, when we're using our devices, we're using them differently. So if you're looking at it only behaviorally, you might be one person on your mobile phone, you might be one person on your desktop and another person on your tablet. So the ability to tie those together is super important. And when you're talking about the pillars of transparency, and one of the big ones that's always being brought up is in-view, because it's 50% that's out of view. If you're not getting your frequency right, it's more than 66% that's not reaching the audience that you want it to reach. So that's a quite important thing. And it just goes to show again, as an example for, you need to dig deeper and ask more questions when you're building your data stack. It's not very easy to get like for like data these days. Yeah. And wow. So after that example, I've tried to dig out a little bit data on what is really the status. How many brands are in the house? Anyone working with brands? Oh, at least 1, 2, a couple, not that many. All right, but I found some numbers on what is the status of basically integrating data across marketing technologies. And it's not I think from my point of view, you can look at it in 2 ways. I think it's not so positive. This is a quite recent study published by eMarketer. It's from February this year. And it says that about 6% of the brands that was asked here was doing nothing. 43% was talking about it. And 51% was acting on actually activating the data across the marketing platforms that they have. And I was expecting that it would be more. And hoping that it would be more, because I think that it is, inevitably super important that you start thinking about these things, that you start activating the data and start understanding what are the important parts in the data ecosystem to make your data work for you. I think we know some of the good examples. You've probably seen this one, which is one of my favorite stories around it. The Economist is a quite old article, it's probably a couple of years old. To give you a quick wrap up, it's basically saying that data is the new oil, and it's making a case that the walled gardens today are as powerful as the oil magnates were 100 years ago. And 100 years ago, those monopolies were broken up by governmental intervention. That's the short story of it. And I think that there's no doubt, and you can also see that from all the conversations we're having down here, that data has, I'm not sure if it's the new oil, but it has a big power attached to it. And there's a lot of these conversations about governmental intervention. I'm not personally for governmental intervention, but it will be very interesting to see who can challenge the walled gardens if it's not going to be a governmental intervention. I think some of the recent conversations that are coming out of Silicon Valley, apparently Margrethe Vestager from the European Union is the most powerful person in Silicon Valley these days. I saw that from a Kleiner Perkins interview. So I think that it might be heading towards some level of governmental breakup. And I can look at Ollie and see that it's about time. So I think we will leave it there. And I hope that I give a little bit food for thought that you could bring into your businesses later on. So thank you. Yeah.